Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're diving into something that literally reads like a high-stakes financial thriller, but it's actually just the cold, hard mathematics of our national economy. We're unpacking a fascinating analysis from a CPA named Brian. He runs a platform called Hidden Tax, and he's looking past all the usual political noise to show us how the actual mechanics of the national debt might be directly targeting something super personal to you, your retirement. We're going to break down the numbers, strip away the headlines, and just look at exactly what the math is telling us. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this next number because the sheer size of that debt generates a very real, very immediate problem. $1 trillion. According to the Hidden Tax analysis, by the year 2026, the government's annual interest payment, literally just the interest on the debt, is going to hit $1 trillion. Just really think about that for a second. That's not paying down the principal, that's not building roads, it's not funding schools, that is simply the carrying cost of the national credit card. And that brings us to the final and honestly most urgent number in this sequence. $11 trillion. Our source points out that to keep the whole system standing this year alone, the government needs to find buyers for $11 trillion in treasuries. The scale of this is just staggering. They have to find enough investors willing to absorb this massive mountain of debt just to maintain current operations and service the obligations they already have. It's this relentless spinning cycle of borrowing just to pay for past borrowing. So how does this actually affect you? Well, it brings these massive macro numbers right down to your personal paycheck. Brian, our CPA source, frames it this way, and I'll just quote him directly here. Imagine a silent clock ticking behind your paycheck. In 2026, our interest bill alone hit $1 trillion. That isn't just a number, it's a massive siphon targeting your future and specifically your Social Security safety net. That is a seriously stark, urgent warning, right? It shifts the whole narrative away from distant Washington economics and puts it right inside your wallet. According to this analysis, it's not just a government problem anymore. It's a full-blown taxpayer crisis. So how exactly does this mechanism actually work? How does a government debt problem magically transform into a threat to your paycheck? Well, we need to look under the hood at the actual mechanics behind these dramatic numbers to understand exactly how this trap operates. The source relies heavily on a financial concept called the refinancing cliff. It's basically defined as the immediate necessity for the US government to sell that $11 trillion in treasuries in a single year just to maintain its current operations and avoid a collapse. Because the debt is so incredibly high and those interest payments are so large, the author mathematically concludes that the government is officially trapped. They literally can't just stop borrowing. If they fail to roll over this debt by finding new buyers, well, the government simply cannot pay its bills. Now, the analysis draws a really sharp contrast between what we're told on the news and what the math actually dictates. Brian suggests we skip what he calls the economic theater. You know, those public debates over minor budget cuts, the political posturing, the constant assurances that the economy is totally fine, and instead, look at the CPA's reality check. The actual math shows a government caught in a severe debt trap. The numbers, they don't care about politics, they only care about balance sheets. And right now, according to the source, that math is incredibly fragile. Because of this exact fragility, the author asserts we are essentially looking at a giant house of cards. When you have an $11 trillion refinancing cliff looming, you are entirely dependent on the market's willingness to just keep lending you money. But what happens when there aren't enough buyers for all that debt? The analysis suggests that to stall a total collapse, the Federal Reserve will eventually be forced to step in and print the medicine, meaning they'll have to create new money out of thin air to buy the debt that the open market won't touch, which, as you might guess, introduces a whole new set of economic problems, primarily inflation, which just eats away at the value of whatever money you've managed to save. And this brilliantly illustrates the core thesis of the analysis. We've established the trap, but the big question is, who actually pays for it? The source argues that the impact lands directly on the everyday worker through what they call the Social Security siphon. This is where the macro-level debt connects directly to your micro-level retirement planning. Let's see how this builds step by step through the author's mathematical domino effect. Step 1. The sheer size of the national debt causes market anxiety. When investors get nervous about a $39 trillion debt, interest rates spike because they demand a higher return for taking on that extra risk. Okay, moving to step 2. To prevent a collapse, the system desperately requires cash to keep functioning and to pay those higher interest rates. And then step 3. Where does that cash actually come from? The analysis points directly at your payroll taxes. Instead of funding your future retirement like it's supposed to, those tax dollars are increasingly being siphoned off to pay the interest owed to bondholders today. This crucial point is perfectly summarized by the phrase, collateralizing your future. This is perhaps the absolute starkest claim in the entire analysis. The argument here is that everyday citizens are effectively acting as the collateral for national overspending. Think about it, when the government spends way beyond its means for decades, it eventually has to pledge a reliable stream of income to guarantee all that debt. And the single most reliable stream of income the government has? It's those consistent payroll taxes taken out of your check every single week. Your safety net is basically being used to bail out the bondholders. Staring down this mathematical reality, you might be wondering, okay, so what are we actually supposed to do about it? Well, our source doesn't just outline the doom and gloom, he also provides his specific strategy for navigating it. He calls it building your fortress. Essentially, it's a way to insulate your personal wealth from all these systemic risks we've just been talking about. So, here are the CPA's specific recommendations for keeping the math in your favor. First off, you have to recognize the trap for what it actually is. It's mathematics, not politics. Second, actively decide that you aren't going to be a victim of this hidden siphon. But the real core of his actionable advice is the third point: own hard assets. He heavily advises shifting your portfolio toward assets that the government literally cannot print. Because if the Fed has to print the medicine to avoid that refinancing cliff we talked about, fiat currency is going to devalue. Hard assets are presented here as the ultimate shield to protect your own personal wealth explosion from being silently eroded by the national debt burden. So, we've unpacked the massive numbers, the underlying mechanics, and the proposed solutions from the hidden tax analysis. It really paints a picture of a financial system caught in a massive math problem, with the everyday worker's safety net basically caught in the crossfire. So, I'll leave you to think on this provocative question derived from our source today. Take a look at your next paycheck, look at those deductions, and really ask yourself, is your retirement acting as collateral for national overspending? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the tough questions about your financial future, and I'll catch you next time.